Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our channel. This is the series on the ATIH, the Awakening the Lumen Heart, with the teachers that teach this amazing content. And today with us is Ron LaPla, but I'll ask him what's his name and how to say it properly. Hi, Ron.
Hi. It's good to talk to you, Gabriel.
Yeah. Want to tell us how you say your name properly? I might be misspelling it.
Actually, very few say it properly because the name is actually La Placa,
Okay.
which is Sicilian.
Oh, no way.
And so, yes, but because I grew up in a country where there were both French and English, it was much easier to simply say it as La Place,
Okay.
which is the French pronunciation for the same thing. Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks for that. And so, Ron, where are you right now?
Right now, I'm in Colorado in the US.
Nice.
My
And
home is in Alberta, Canada.
oh, gotcha. All right, brilliant. So you are going to go back to Canada soon, I assume.
Yes, in about 2 weeks' time. Yeah.
Beautiful. Want to tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Okay. For me, I went through the traditional education in Canada at the time through high school, started in university, and about the same time as I started in university, I also started something called the College Lessons of the Brotherhood of the White Temple, which is metaphysical information. And so after 3 months of university, I made the decision that I wasn't receiving what I thought I wanted from that course of study, but I was getting exactly what I wanted from the Brotherhood of the White Temple information. So I let go of university and continued on the college lessons of Brotherhood and went through that program and ended up with what's called a Doctor of Metaphysics through their program.
Brilliant. So you basically have a PhD in metaphysics or philosophy?
It's not a PhD in that you're not writing a thesis and going through all that, but you end up with that degree through their college.
Okay,
Yeah.
brilliant. That's fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit more about this brotherhood and what kind of content you studied at that time?
Well, uh, it opened up the world to me. Just before that period, I was 19 at the time. And just before that, I had had an experience where uh, someone had put a set of headphones. Uh, this was someone I hadn't known previously. We just met that evening, and he took me to a place down in the bedroom in someone's home and put this set of headphones on me and said, "Listen to this." And so I didn't know what was going on. I listened to the sound, and the sound began with these words: "This garden universe vibrates complete. Some make it a sound so sweet. Vibrations reach on up to become light, then through gamma, out of sight. Between the eyes and ears there lies the sounds of color and the light of a sigh. And to hear the sun, what a thing to believe, but it's all around, if we could but perceive. Two notes of the chord, that's our full scope. But to reach the chord is our life's hope. And to name the chord is important to some, so they give it a word. And the word is Aum. And that was the beginning of a song by the Moody Blues. When I heard that sound, Aum, something went up my spine and lifted my body almost out of, I was sitting on the floor. by the way, I've never remembered that full verse before until just now. Um, so I didn't know it then, but that was an awakening. And before that time, I had never thought of anything outside of the norm. And that awakening continued. And so the path that took me to the Brotherhood was, I believe that was all part of what was going on in that. And of course, the Brotherhood was created by a man named Doreel in
What's his name?
Doreel, Doreal. And Doreel essentially was a student of and also a teacher of Thoth. And so,
Yeah. He's the author of the translation of the
yes,
Emerald Tablets. Right.
yeah. So that was something that began for me when I was 19 now. So that was in 1970. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Thanks for
So
sharing that.
my relationship with these things began at that time. And for me, then to discover Drunvalo in 1997.
It was like a
That,
continuation.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. And so, what is your former career background?
Well, I went through many iterations. I, I, I was a milkman. I worked in a liquor store. I went into, in Alberta, Canada, the oil and gas business is very large. And so I was in a part of that. And then eventually I kind of moved away. I moved out into the wilderness part of Alberta and built my own log home. And from that experience, I ended up in 1979 installing a solar power system in a home when nobody knew what solar power was. And I decided to create a business out of that, and I did that. And that business went through until the mid 1990s when another shift happened, and I decided to leave the business world and go back into the spiritual realm. And that's when I discovered, at that time, the book, The Ancient Secret of the Flowers of Life, didn't exist. What did exist was a book that was written that had a very funny title called Nothing in This Book is True, but It's Exactly the Way Things Are by Bob Frizzell. And that book literally fell off the shelf into my hands in a bookstore. And that started the journey with Drunvalo.
Actually, one of your colleagues had the very same experience.
Mm-hmm.
Book fell off the shelf and led them to Drunvalo. That's very fascinating. By the way, I also built solar panel systems, and I've been in the industry for quite some time by now. So I know the love and the hate of that. But
well, yeah, the business now is very different. I left about the time it was becoming where the public was very interested in solar. So yeah.
Completely different technology. Okay, so that asks our basic questions to give an introduction, our audience, who you are. And I would like to know from you if you can describe your personal experiences of the Merkaba. But before doing that, tell us how you met Drunvalo. You mentioned the book that led you to Drunvalo, but what happened after?
Okay. My first experience in meeting Drunvalo was I first took the Flower of Life workshop in 1997 in Sedona. I'm going to mention my teacher's name, Alana Hartzon. Um, and I took the workshop in Sedona, a 3-day workshop at that time. And I had a profound experience. I had, previous to that, in order to take the workshop at that time, you had to watch a 6-day uh, video recording of Drunvalo teaching the Flower of Life workshop from I think it was 84 that was done. You had to watch that. And for me, when I received all of these tapes, and you had to buy these tapes and watch this video, when I received them, I began watching the first tape and plugged it into the VHS machine at that time and turned it on, sat down on the couch, and immediately developed a fever of 104 degrees. I don't know what that is in centigrade. That would be like 42, maybe?
Right. Yeah. A little less, but yes, I agree.
Okay. And I stayed for 4 days on the couch in that fever,
Watching the
watching those
rest
videos.
of the tapes.
When I wasn't watching the videos, I was unconscious, whether it's hallucinating or what. But I went through a whole process with sacred geometry in those 4 days, watching the videos and then also just collapsing. And so uh, I'd had the introduction to all of that. But in this workshop in Sedona, it was the first time where I believe what that class, the Flower of Life, really was for me was where my left brain and right brain finally went into an agreement about the unity of all life. And what that agreement allowed, and I felt this literally, was that my left and right brain finally went into peace with each other and joined together. And when they did, I felt a doorway open to my heart. And so at that moment, all of the information that I'd been absorbing since I was 19 years old was given a home for the first time. Because the brain can't be home because it's not in unity. There are different places where all this is stored, but it's all stored in separate sections. It doesn't have a place where it comes together as one. And that was the moment when all of that came together as one. It was a very important moment for me. And I knew then that that would be my path.
Mhm.
So, um,
Matt Drunvalo.
a few months later, there were no, Drunvalo had said previous to that that there were enough Flower of Life teachers in the world, there didn't need to be anymore. Many things happened, and eventually there, uh, the organization, the Flower of Life, was being run by two people at that time, and they decided to do a training for new Flower of Life facilitators. I didn't know that, but in early 1998, I decided to call them after having a dream. And in that dream, I was walking with Drunvalo on a ridge, looking down into a valley, and there were thousands of people down in the valley. And he turned and said to me, "These are the people you will teach." The next morning, I called the Flower of Life office and the person on the other side, one of the two people running the Flower of Life at that time, said, "That's very interesting because we just decided last night when the first training of facilitators would be." And so I knew that I was definitely following the path that I was intended to be on. And so that was in 1998. In 2000, I sponsored Drunvalo to come to Canada, and we did a workshop in a place called Banff, Alberta, which is very close to the etheric home of Archangel Michael. And Drunvalo had been there a few years previously. I didn't know that then, but I learned. So I sponsored Drunvalo, and that's really when we met and began to know each other. Yeah.
Beautiful. And so how was the transition from you from the Flower of Life practice and the awakening the lumen heart practice? For many teachers, it sounded like a heavy transition and something.
Yeah. Well, over the course of those next 10 years, I actually hosted Drunvalo a number of times in different parts of North America. And we worked together fairly extensively. And through that time, he was developing his work. At that time, the classes he were teaching began with what was called the Earth Sky Workshop. And that then morphed into what was called the Earth Sky Heart Workshop.
Mm.
And that's when he started to integrate more of the heart. And the workshops were always great, but there was a form of testing, experimentation going on in them. I didn't really know that as I was going through this whole process, but when we got to 2010 or so, it was clear that something was shifting and changing. And then Drunvalo asked myself, another teacher of the Flower of Life, who had hosted him many times in Mexico primarily, to help in doing a training for new work. And that was, it had no name at that time. The two of us were both teaching something called Living in the Heart, which was kind of the point between the Flower of Life and Awakening the Illuminated Heart. Drunvalo had given us permission to teach that. And then he asked us to help develop the training for the ATI, what became the ATI. And so the first training happened without a name. And it wasn't until after that training that the name Awakening the Illuminated Heart was given. And it was given the day after the training. We spent the afternoon, and Drunvalo kind of went into meditation and came up with that name then. So that was in 2011, the first training.
Nice. And so what is your personal experience of the Merkaba? How do you live it? How do you use it on a daily basis, or when back then when you were practicing just the Flower of Life?
Excuse me.
Sure.
Wow. Okay. I mentioned a little about what happened for me when I took the Flower of Life the first time. And the first time I did the Merkaba meditation. Now, I had, at that time, the Merkaba was a 17 step, actually very masculine meditation.
Mm.
And I had attempted to do it. And in doing so, my own inner guidance said, no, stop. You need to be instructed in this. So I did the workshop, received the instruction, and did the meditation for the first time. And it was profound. I had a profound experience. It took, well, at that time in order to establish the Merkaba so that it becomes permanent, it took a long time then. And so I did every day, I did the meditation for 6 months. And I knew at some period in that time that I had established the Merkaba field. But I'm kind of curious about things, so I decided, what would it be like not to have it?
Mm.
So I stopped doing it. This was after 6 months or so. And it took 4 days at that time for the field to collapse.
Mm.
And after 4 days, when I felt the field not there anymore, I began to do it again. It took another period of time, whether it was weeks or months, I don't remember now, but to establish it again fully. So after that, I never stopped. Now, I don't know. I've heard Drunvalo say that it could take up to 2 years or so for it to become permanent when we were doing it in that way. And you understand now, I assume, having talked to many people about this, that the Merkaba as it was being formed then was really a product, a creation of the mind.
Right.
And so that's really the why it was impermanent, because it was coming as close as it could to from the unified field. But the mind is a very difficult place to be centered in. And so something needed to happen. Now, as you learn in the actual workshop, the ATIH workshop, they being what do we want to call that? What do we want to call they? The ascended masters, the ones who are really trying to help humanity, had tried to introduce the information of the ATIH workshop in the mid 1980s. And it didn't work. And it's really simple why it didn't work. It's because the feminine aspect, primarily the women, could get it. But the masculine aspect, primarily the men, could not. So there needed to be something that could assist the masculine aspect to move into a place where we could actually begin to work from the heart, which is the ATIH work. And so
Is there a
Drunvalo,
specific reason why the men weren't getting it? What I mean,
sure,
the masculine wasn't getting it?
because they couldn't move into the heart sufficiently to provide a fertile, balanced place for this work to take root. You see, when we're too much in one or the other, masculine or feminine, there isn't balance. There has to be balance in order for that doorway I spoke of to open up, so that all that we contain here in the mind can have a place that I called home when I described that movement. Without that, we can't be in balance enough to begin the movement, the growth that comes from the unified field. And that's really the point. So there had to be a way of assisting that movement. The Merkaba is essential to the progression of life here on Earth. And so that's what Drunvalo came to do. He was prepared to begin that work because he'd been putting together all the pieces of sacred geometry for the 12 years previous to that.
Mm. Okay, and so during that time, how did you use the Merkaba? And was there any specific experience you remember was telling you really, okay, I got it now, it's stable, or okay, I got it, I can make it do this or that, or healing process, anything that you remember?
Mostly it was an inner feeling. First of all, I would do things like um, sit in a place on the ground and um, establish the field, and then I'd, I'd get up and I'd just walk until I felt where the edge of that field was, and I'd mark that spot and then go across to mark the other spot,
Mm.
and just totally by feeling.
Mm.
So I could actually understand how large the field was and what was happening in it. And for me, that the diameter of that field was about 52.5 feet, which I think works out to about 17 meters. And so, I would just experiment with that. Now, in my journey, I'd had a very deep experience with a being that's actually part of the Japanese tradition. Uh, she's a being who is deeply connected to Mother Earth, and her name is Amaterasu. And in 2000, I hosted a workshop that was called, at that time, the Seed of Life. And the teachers of that workshop were the teachers from the Flower of Life school. And in that workshop on my property, we built uh, a Fibonacci rectangle and then a Fibonacci spiral within it. It was a temple. It was built by the participants of that workshop, 37 of us from all over the world. And 2 or 3 days after that workshop, I went out to the temple and went into the temple and walked the spiral. It was big. It was approximately, well, it was done to Fibonacci dimensions, so I believe it was 8 meters by 13 meters. And the spiral inside, I walked the spiral, and when I got to the center of the spiral, or the end point, uh, my connection to Amaterasu opened, and she asked me to do something. I'd had other experiences, but this one was very profound. And it was perhaps one of the primary moments when I really understood that what we were doing, what we were working with, what I had felt connected to in all this time was very real, and not just it went from a kind of faith to a knowing.
Experiential
Yeah,
life
yeah,
direct. Yeah,
yeah.
fascinating. And how about the tiny space of the heart and the ATIH ATI process? How do you use the tiny space of the heart, and what is your personal experience of that?
Okay. In the ATIH workshop, we talk a lot about creation
Mm.
and about how understanding that there's a different way of creating from the mind uh, than creating from the tiny space in the heart. And the difference is that the mind is in polarity, and that the tiny space is in unity,
Mm.
what I call the unified field. And so when you actually begin to occupy that space in the heart, the unified field, um, you're actually in the process of doing the meditation that you learn in the ATI workshop. You're actually assisting. You're kind of turning the tables between the heart and the brain. For a long time, the brain has been the master in this relationship, or at least has been attempting to be the master. When you, in this work called Awakening the Illuminated Heart, you move into the tiny space of the heart and you actually make an offering, an invitation to the brain for the two of you to work together. That's a very interesting moment. When you get to the place where the brain can actually feel safe enough to accept that invitation, and you become established in the tiny space of the heart, when you actually start to create from that place, uh, it's what I would say many people would call magic. What happens is when you're existing in the brain, and let's say you want to do something, change something, you're thinking of what it takes to do that. And so uh, in the workshop, when you're watching the PowerPoint and it says that, you know, the brain is using thought, and then you have intent, attention and intention. And then you bring in a feeling or an emotion into that. And this is how the creation process works from the brain. But in the heart, first of all, you're not using thought, you're using dreams and images, the
Mm.
vision that's in the heart. Then the interesting thing is you can use attention and intention or not. The heart doesn't need to know the outcome. It doesn't need to have that attention or intention. If you're willing, you can allow it to be whatever it needs to be. That's a whole different level of trust, faith, or knowing
Mm.
that it's going to be exactly what it needs to be. And so when you begin having these experiences, what tends to happen in your life is that you come into a situation, and if it's not in cohesion or balance, if you will be in your heart in that situation, the way it comes into balance or cohesion is a way that more often than not you could never even imagine. It's like magic.
Mm.
Something happens that you couldn't have imagined that brings it into harmony. And when that starts happening in your life, um, then you understand that this place isn't just a nice place to be, it is our destiny.
I'm gonna ask you a selfish question, and I'll possibly come close to some of the individuals listening and some of the audience at the moment. And that is the question of, in meditation, I may or may not come to a space of the heart. And I am pretty sure by now how to get there and what is the actual experience. But majority of the time, when I'm in that space, there's a very loud sounds of peace. And there's a little voice up there that keeps saying, dude, you got a life to live, you got to take care of this, this, and that. And so how are you going to do that if you're in that eternal space of peace?
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot hide to you, this has been going on for a while. And my mind has been pretty good in managing daily activities. I have 2 masters. I've been successful in different endeavors of work, and I cannot complain. Let's just say, I mean, like everybody, there's never enough money, there's never enough time, and plenty of desires to fulfill and experiences to have and places to visit. But the question here is one of balance, just like you said. How do you balance the 2 beasts here? Where the coherence point between brain and heart? How do you allow the mind? I mean, there are times understanding when the mind just wants to be at peace. Yeah, had enough, it needs to shut down, and those are the, it happens pretty much in the evening every time. But there are other times when it's like telling me, all right, dude, what do you do with this piece of how do you translate it into your daily life? How do you live it and express it in the everyday world? And I would love to hear your opinion on the subject.
Well, Gabriel, what I believe I've been describing to you is a process. Mm-hmm. And when the mind can experience this relationship and feel safe, that's really a key moment. Mm. And my experience has been that it doesn't become permanent just like that. The mind will begin to question at another point and say, wait a minute here, is this true? Can this be real? And that's when you need to fall back on the training of how to move into the heart, go into it, and once again establish that connection so that it can be proven to the mind once again that not only is it safe here, but this is the place of magic, where things can happen in a way that they can't possibly happen when you're living in polarity. So that becomes a journey of moving back in. In the workshop, again, you learn that there are different ways to enter into the heart. And once you've done it, once you've really established that place, it's all that it takes to move back in is to remember either the feeling or the sound, some way of just remembering what it is to be in the tiny space, and you can go back there instantly. That's a relationship. And so when you establish that relationship deeply enough so that you can go back there instantly, then all it takes is to be conscious and aware of where you are in the moment.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ron. The next question is very much related to the equation that people have in their daily life. Everybody thinks that they're happy when money and health and relationships are in place, or they reflect their expectations. And eventually they come to answering deeper questions like, why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? And they approach yoga or meditation or other paths that way. Vice versa, many people are already on a spiritual journey and they have issues with those 3 elements of the equation. So how do you how can you address that? Can you share ideas or recommendations or how to use the Merkaba and the tiny space of the heart to take care of health, money, and relationships?
Okay, well, those are all huge issues in our world, always have been and certainly are now. Um, we're all on a journey in each of those areas. Again, one of the principles in the Flower of Life that was really powerful for me was learning about something called the feminine stargate. And you know that in the Flower of Life, you have read the books, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, and you know that the star tetrahedron, the shape of these two combined tetrahedrons that has 8 points, becomes very important in that work. That particular geometry has a great importance because it's a geometry that is around our body. And there are 8 points to that geometry. And that this thing that I mentioned, the feminine stargate, there's a way of relating the qualities of that stargate to each one of those 8 points. That there are 2 tetrahedrons. It might help to have just a little geometry here, if you'll bear with me. Okay, so this is a tetrahedron. It's like a pyramid, but it has 3 sides and then a base, the 4th side. And when we think of this feminine stargate, there are qualities, and there's a masculine and feminine component to the star tetrahedron. The qualities of the feminine stargate are love, truth, and beauty. I'm sorry, you can't see that. So we'll say love, truth, and beauty. Now, the star tetrahedron is 2 of these combined. So I'm going to take this and flip it to represent the other tetrahedron. So we had those first 3 components, love, truth, and beauty. The next component is trust, harmony, and peace. So those are the 6 aspects. Then there's 2 more. The one that was above, when it was like this, and the one that's below, when it's like this. Those are both the same quality, and that quality is reverence for God. There's a certain point.
On the axis is reverence for God.
Yes, reverence for God. Now, there's a point where you have to go from love, truth, beauty. You have to make a journey to cross to the second tetrahedron. You have to actually go through the great void to get to this other quality, and that quality is trust. So there's a little, let's call it a secret in that, a secret teaching. In order to move through the void, it's that quality that's so important. That quality is trust. At a certain point, you move beyond trust, beyond faith, into knowing. But what's required to move into that journey through the void, until you know, you first have to trust. You first have to have faith. That's true in any religion. They have that teaching as well. And there's a truth in it. There needs to be that belief that builds the bridge through what we call the great void, so that you can move to the other waters. And that's part of all that this is too. This movement into the heart requires a level of trust as well.
Okay. And that is relating to, how's that relating to the three elements of life that we were talking about, the three elements of happiness? Remember, money.
Okay, so if you have that, I had forgotten where I was going with this.
I'm sure you were making a connection.
I was going to tell you that when I first started to do the Merkaba and had thought about being a teacher back in late 1990s, I had a question. Well, how will I live?
Mm-hmm.
And when I asked that question, I was asking it from a place inside, the place that I talk to, whatever you want to call it, my guidance, my higher self. And the response was, if you will do this, you will be taken care of.
Mm.
And I trusted that response.
Mm.
And that is something that I fall back on. I've fallen back on that trust many times in the ensuing years.
Mm.
And it's always worked.
Fair enough. That's a great point. Anything related to relationship or health?
Again, it's really the same thing. All of these things are, many of us want those three qualities. We want the health, we want the money, we want the relationship. We have a desire for these things. In every case, that desire is actually what we want to have with ourself first.
Excellent point.
If we can establish that relationship with ourself, that gives a foundation where it can then move out into the world as well.
Mm.
So the first work is typically the work that most avoid, and that's the work with self.
Mm-hmm.
To trust ourselves enough, to be safe enough with ourself that we can bring health to ourself, we can bring wealth to ourself, and we can bring relationship. And relationship of all those is perhaps the most important
Of the three.
of the three.
How come?
It's important with ourself, and it's the most important with others.
Mm.
If we're in any kind of spiritual work, why are we doing it? And the answer, if you're truly going to be working in a spiritual or sacred way, must be that you're serving life. If you are doing that, then you are assisting growth and expansion in life. If you're serving self, then that's the opposite.
You're part of life. I share your opinion, and I also believe that you have to include yourself when you're serving. If you're just serving and your service becomes a sacrifice, then your service will be very short-lived.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there needs to be balance.
Exactly. And so, yeah, including oneself in service is fundamental. Just like loving yourself in relationships comes before loving someone else. And there's no way you can have a relationship with someone else you can't love yourself. Totally
But
agree.
it
The
becomes
beast is the
lonely.
money in there. Money is the real beast in that equation, because you can always make money. And actually, if you make money, you do it for yourself, rarely for someone else, unless you have a family. So that's a delicate one, I guess. And there's never an end to how much money you can make, or a limit to how much you want. I mean, a lot of people are humble and they have enough with $1 million. But you know, a lot of people want a trillion, and they want to, or you know, then the number doesn't even matter. They just want to be the richest in the world. So there's
Correct.
not even a purpose for it. It's just self-proclamation.
Yeah. It's an endless hole that can't be filled. Yes.
Right. Okay, so I love your answer. You look inside first, take care of your relationship with yourself, with your higher self, with your, and love yourself before you look outside, and that applies to both money and wealth and as well as health. My next question for you is, if you have you noticed any spike in extrasensory perceptions since you first awakened your light body or used the Merkaba? And then if there was another gear, you know, like if you saw another spike when you started becoming well acquainted with the tiny space of the heart.
Well, once again, this is all part of a process. And what I'll speak to in answering this question is that there's a terminology. Before we started the interview, you spoke a little bit about your personal journey. And so you understand when I use the term siddhis, that this is one of the things that happens as you start to develop your personal power. You're accessing these powers that are within you, and it's a process. If you're on this journey, this is what happens. Now, the thing is that that can't be the reason you're on the journey. It may be a result, a part of the journey, but it can't be the reason for doing it. And so this is a part where in the journey you're going to have to at some point deal with your ego. Now, in other spiritual practices or studies uh, that will be discussed in different ways, in the Bible, it's called the temptation of Christ.
Mm. Right.
And so, why are look what you've done. You have these abilities now. And what are you using them for? And again, that question comes up. Are you in service to life or are you in service to self? And that's
Excellent.
exactly what the temptation of Christ is describing.
You have an excellent point here. I respect all of that. There's one exception, if you allow me, to those cities or these extrasensory perceptions that I really strongly believe are the next step for humanity's development. I mean, like we need to go beyond Homo sapiens, and then it will be Homo psychic, and it is an arrogant expectations of mind, or somehow a naive one, if you want. But I really strongly and profoundly believe that the only way we can change the world we live in is through telepathy and psychic abilities, because that's the only way to eliminate corruption. There is no other way. If we are of one mind, if I can hear your thoughts before you steal something off of mine, or before you tax me for something that I have all the rights for, or before you inject something in my body when your intention is that of killing me or long-term detrimentally diminishing the quality of my life and my body, then I can hear you. I can know your true intention before I allow you to do all of that. And, I may be very naive about all of this, but I really think it's the only way forward for humanity. Technology is not going to take care of that. Technology is always in the hands of the few individuals. I mean, in fact, like this is what we will see. These little things are helping us. They are a surrogate for our desperate need for connection, but they're not going to fulfill that need in the long run. And that's why I was asking the question. I really think that there is, I've noticed personally, since I've been practicing, a heightened awareness. My sensory perceptions have become sharper. I can hear people before, for example, something that a lot of people will relate to. I know who's texting me before the message comes. or I know who's on the phone before I actually answer, or before I see the name on it. But these are very simple phenomena. We cannot even, people don't want to call them psychic or not. There's an amazing author. I mentioned him a couple of times in the other interviews, Rupert Sheldrake. Brilliant, amazing scientist. He's mapped all of this out. He's a biologist and has been on YouTube and TED Talks multiple times, been also blocked out and censored. Because of the very reason that he's teaching people, opening people's mind on the idea that they can use their brain to, do more than just calculate and relate to each other's.
Well, in all of that, there is a question, and I believe I have a very simple response to it. There are no secrets in the heart.
Excellent point. Yeah. And there's no manipulating someone that is in the heart. Right. Excellent. I like that. Thank you for
Truly sharing. In the heart, not just in some form of compassion, because that can be if the compassion is operating, let's say, through the mind, then it's going to be a product of the ego. But when you are absolutely in the tiny space in the heart, there are no secrets. And so if you're interested in finding a way to actually have a place of discrimination that is the best lie detector, hang out there.
Veka, yes. Yeah. Or discernment, yes. I completely, totally agree. But that again is in the mind, and so duality will be subjecting its shades into your perception.
Yes. So what we know is that we are participating in this experiment that will take us back to a place of unity. This is how I see it anyway. We agreed to come here and participate in an experiment where we went into the density of polarity in such a way that we forgot who we were and we forgot our connection to God. We're on our way back now to our connection in such a way that we move back into unity. We move back into the unified field. This is a journey. And now, as we're coming much closer to the point where we actually succeed in bringing ourselves back to that point, the forces of separation and polarity are desperate to maintain that way of being. And that tells us how close we are to actually completing this because of that desperation. So we're getting really close.
One of your colleagues said something when I posed the same question. I mentioned the technology. She was like, all of you saying is true, but there's no way you can actually manipulate anyone's heart. So it was a very similar answer, and I appreciate now you sharing that. I have one last question in this section, and it's very much connected to what we're talking about. So why don't you elaborate a little bit more on your perception of the world and what's going on right now, and in light of the last couple of year and a half of turmoil on a global scale, and mention to us what is the Earth evolution in your opinion? Is it 2000 was the year of the end of the biblical universe, and 2012 was the end of the Mayan calendar, and then finally the world ended, and that was 2020, and now we're kind of what's happening now. Yeah. And what is the ascension process? What is the opinion on that subject? It's a word that's not everyone's mouth.
All that time period, and going through Y2K and all that. At a certain point, we let go of dates, and we just let life be. And it becomes a natural progression, a natural flow. And wherever we are is where we need to be in that journey. And yes, I have to admit, in this last year, I have had a certain discomfort as I watched uh, so many people go into fear in such a way that they give their power away so completely. But this too is part of the journey of becoming awake enough to begin to change internally. And so, even this that we're going through now, the kind of separation, not only do you have to separate by 2 meters or 6 feet, uh, we're being told that, gosh, I left the country, Canada, a few months ago, and now to get back in, I have to go through, I can't believe the process. I have to go in, get back into my own country. Um, Separation is everywhere in our world right now, and fear is at a level I've never experienced in my life before. And so I was surprised by this, and it was somewhat disturbing, but um, I believe that I've come to much more of a balance with that now, and knowing that this is all about this journey of awakening, and we are uh, right now much closer to that point than we were 2 years ago, because um, we are pushing ourselves into a corner. We're not being pushed there by some other force. We are doing it to ourselves. And in taking responsibility for your part in that journey, there's a form of peace that can offer you a place, a foundation to walk the journey in more balance.
Okay. And in light of that, the ascension process, what would you like to share?
Hmm. Again, I over time, I've come to a place where I know that this is where I'm meant to be. This is where I need to be. Ascension will be in its own time and in its own way. That movement back into unity will happen in absolute right divine time. And I need to be here now in this moment. And so I choose to be here and not so much worried about being somewhere else.
I was wondering if you were going to touch on the subject of belief system, because there's a lot of that whenever I read or hear people online talking about ascension, excuse me, or in the ascension process. And it sounds like everyone has their own opinion on the
Sure, that's
the
fine.
subject. Yeah.
The part that I can't agree with is that uh, people are wanting to be somewhere else, or that they want some other party or entity to come and assist us out of here.
Mm.
I can't agree with that. This is exactly where we need to be. This is exactly what we have created together. And this is our pathway. Um, it's not about going somewhere else. It's not about leaving. It's about being here and being part of the journey with the earth through this process. The Merkaba is that. If you are um, part of this experience of the Merkaba, that's exactly what it is. It's to take you into a full relationship with Mother Earth, because we're doing this journey together. There's no other way to do it.
Mm. A lot of people would have a few denial questions on your statement about us deciding that this is what we wanted or this is what we created. A lot of people may think that China created this current issue. A lot of people believe that America is creating this issue, and a lot of other people believe that the Federal Reserve and the people behind the WEF have created all of this. We're not
These
here to
are all
discuss.
averages. Yeah,
I
these
don't
are all
think.
stories of the mind, and this is the journey. All of those things are true. You know, the separation of the countries, the separation of wealth, all of these things are true in our life and our experience now.
Right. They are part of our experience, but the question is, how do we address it? Because this is not what we want.
There's only one way, and that's the movement into the heart.
Yeah. So tell me how that is going to affect the world we live in. I mean, we go into the heart, will make us take the right decisions to manifest the world that we want.
Yeah. So
So it has to be a mass movement.
again, you have a background in the East with India. So I'm going to put on my Ramana Maharshi hat and ask you a question. Who asks this question?
Mm.
You see, this is the mind. The mind cannot perceive a way out of this, what the mind would call a mess. But the heart already knows the answer. The thing is, if the mind is asking the question, there is no answer that will be good enough. There can't be. But if you go into your heart, the answer is already there. And that's what we have to do. Now, I don't expect everybody to just all of a sudden say, all right, that's the answer. Let's go there. That's
Yeah.
not the way it's going to happen. But eventually, this is what will happen.
I think it's a matter of bridging the dichotomy that we experience between the inner reality, or at least that I experience between the inner reality and the reality outside of me. I mean, like it goes back to the question I had before. When I go inside, there's this deep peace and inner state. I mean, I don't want to leave. I'm just in peace, right? And I open my mind, and Jesus, there's 25 phone calls. There is, having to do tests to actually go to get the bread, and like, want to see my mother, I have to do another 4 tests, and like, it's one nonsense after the other. And of course, there are a lot of people out there, they believe that's the only way forward. So how do you, I mean, like, that is the real challenge that we're faced. How do we bridge this universal gap? I mean, I don't even want to call it gap, because that is very optimistic. This is like a massive black hole between our hearts and our brains. Our personal experience and our what we feel are so diverse. And so I don't know. What do you reckon?
Well, you're still a relatively young man, and one of the things that I've learned about getting older is that some of the wisdom that was very difficult to digest as we were younger becomes much easier to understand. And so I don't know if you'll like what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. This too shall pass.
All right. I actually quite like it. I do. And on that note, I'll move to a more fringe question. So this is the naughty section of the interview where I ask you all sorts of crazy questions. So what is your opinion on inner Earth, hollow Earth, and plasma beings, and the eternal ones, the ones that have eternal life? Have you met any, or what is your opinion? What's your experience, if anything, that you want to share on the subject?
Yeah, I've had my own experiences with beings from many different places, aspects. The earth is so much more than we know. We have such a limited view from the perspective of this dimensional aspect that most of us live in. There is so much more that's going on here. And so there's a place for everything that you hear about, whether it's plasma beings, divas, leprechauns, it doesn't matter, fairies. There is a place for everything. And if your heart is open, you will have experiences with whatever is appropriate for you, because that's the way it works. It's not just about deciding someday you're going to have an experience with a certain aspect of life. It's about being open to whatever that experience needs to be for you. And so if you'll be open in that way, it will happen. Um, Especially if you're spending time occupying that space that is the tiny space in the heart.
Mm.
So all of this is wonderful. I mean, again, that goes throughout the realm of experience, whether it's an archangel, you that's real, or whether it's actually communicating with another form of life, like an animal, that's real too. All of these things are there if you'll be open to the experience and if you're doing it from your heart.
Okay. And was there, I assume you have that openness, and you have had, and I'm also assuming that you had such experiences. Is there one that you are comfortable sharing?
Okay. Yeah, there's one that, as you ask the question, comes back because I believe it has a point. So I like to tell stories that have a point. I was in a group, with a group, doing a workshop in Mexico. And we were doing the workshop at a dolphinarium where the dolphins are captive, and we were working with them. And so, as part of one particular meditation in the evening, under starlight, moonlight, we were beside the pool. The pool's big and very deep. And there's a group of dolphins there. And I had established a connection with one of those dolphins. And his name, he had a name. His name was Chocho. In this particular meditation, we were supposed to be 3 people working in a triangle. And the other 2 people didn't show up, who were my partners. So I'm sitting beside this pool and I'm wondering, okay, well, I guess I'll just be here on my own. And all of a sudden, inside me comes a question. And I understand, I see the image of Chocho, the dolphin, asking me this question. And the question is, would you like to do something together? And my response was, yes. And so in that moment, again, inside, in my inner vision, I began seeing the image of a young boy holding his mother's hand, and that boy is me. I'm holding my mother's hand. We're walking up these what seem like really tall concrete stairs, going up to these huge wooden doors into a building. And we walk down this hallway and we go into an office and then into another office. And I'm sitting on this wooden chair with my legs dangling and my mom's beside me. And now we're talking to this man. And my mother is telling him how frightened she is about me. She's very concerned. And she's explaining it's because I'm constantly rocking and I'm banging my head against walls, against things, wherever I'm sitting, and I won't stop. And she asks this man, "Am I okay?" And his response is that, "Yes, Mrs. Laplace, he's okay. There are a number of children that I know that do this, and they're okay." But what I am seeing is just, I heard the fear in my mother's voice. And I know that at that point, I became very conscious about doing that, um, where she could see it. And I heard, at that point, I heard Chocho, his voice, come in. And he showed me something, first of all. He showed what was going on as I was rocking. He showed me a movement that was taking place inside the pineal in the center of my head. And that movement was like, you know how a dolphin swims?
Mm.
And except you do that in all directions at the same time, it becomes like a Mobius strip.
Mm.
And that was what was going on in my pineal
Mm.
as I was rocking. And he said, "This is when you disconnected from us." So I'm taking all this in and I'm understanding, oh, so all that that meant. Now, I'm having this experience and this is amazing. And I hear, literally hear my left brain come in and say, "Oh, come on. Can this be real?"
Doubt. Yeah.
Right. And so that part of me asked the question. And instantly, I'm sitting beside this pool, and I heard Chocho say, "Open your eyes." So I do. Out of the pool, no, little more than a meter away from me, out of the pool comes this dolphin straight up in the air in front. And he goes up, and I'm watching him go up, and I'm watching him make that perfect arc. And as he hits the peak of that perfect arc, two other dolphins do that just in front of me.
Mm.
And then boom, back into the pool goes Chocho. So the question was asked, and the question was answered immediately.
Mm.
Can this be real? And that was the response.
Mm.
So that was what you call a peak experience, a peak moment for me, where I understood that yes, it is real.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Ron. That's a beautiful story. Fascinating. In fact, I think Drunvalo mentioned how strong of a connection we have with dolphins. But that's a subject for another conversation, not on this floor. I want to ask you another question. I know time is of a limit. How much time do we still have?
It's almost noon. We've got another 10 minutes or so. Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you one last question and then we can close. What is your opinion of the sun? What can you tell me about the sun, the solar flashes, the CMEs, the inhabitants of the sun, and the connection that Earth and sun share, not only as the curling currents, but also so in physics terms, but also in metaphysical terms as well?
Yeah. Well, we're in the process of a dance. Now, we are one of a number of bodies that are in relationship to the sun. There are many, and they're more and more being discovered all the time. We know of the solar system. And so all of the bodies that are in the rotational connection to our sun, or part of that. And the sun is going through changes. And so each of those bodies that are connected to the sun are a part of that change. They're going through changes as well. It's a dance, it's a relationship, and the body that we are connected to and on is the earth.
Mm.
And so in these times, it is so important to be grounded to this place. That's why when we talked about ascension, I said it's really important to be here, because we're part of the earth. And the earth and the sun are going through this dance. The masculine and the feminine are coming into a new form of balance. And if we're going to be part of that journey, then first we need to be connected to her. Then we need to be connected to him. And yes, I'm using masculine and feminine because this is the dance we're in. That being the case, then, when you do the ATIH workshop, the very first thing you really do as part of a meditation is to learn the unity breath.
Right.
The connection, the deep connection to Mother Earth and Father Sky or Father Sun, however you want to term that. When you do that, when you truly do it, when you bring the essence of the divine feminine through Mother Earth and the divine masculine through Father Sun into your heart, it opens a space. What's the space for? What do the masculine and feminine do when they come together? They create a space for the divine child. And the divine child is you.
Mm.
So this dance that is going on now is a dance that you can participate in if you will open that space within you. That space where you go into deep relationship with Divine Mother and Father through the earth and the sun, and allow that space for the divine child to open within you, and you are then protected by them.
Fascinating answer. Yes, thank you. I want to give you time right now. We're coming to a closure, so it's that time for the audience to know your website. Why don't you tell us your website, your the address properly, your email, your phone number, if you want to share it any way people can get in touch with you, and maybe a little bit of the events that you have coming up for the next of the year.
Okay.
And also the fascinating, I know people can gather more information on your website, but there's that fascinating spirit tech product of yours on your website. And if you can spend a couple of words on that too, will be amazing.
Right. So website is new. It's only been up now for less than a month. And that is Spirit Tech, spelled SPIRITTEC. So there's two T's. And tech is just TEC.
Yeah,
The
and we'll
name,
put it in the description, and you can actually see an image here as well.
right. So it's spirittech.com. And the name Spirit Tech denotes the marriage between spirit and technology. Through a process in the last couple of years, I have connected with a form of technology that actually allows us to go into a connection with the unified field.
Mm.
And it does that in a way that I was able to adapt to something I've been doing for a number of years, and that's working with sound on the body as a form of healing. And so I adapted all of this into a product, Spirit Tech Sound Systems, that can be used by any practitioner in that wants to work with sound, It doesn't matter if they're a massage therapist, an acupuncturist, a chiropractor, a Reiki practitioner, name a discipline, and you can use this simply and effectively to assist people to come back into balance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the place where healing happens. Now, when you can also introduce the unified field into that balancing, that's very powerful, because that's where creation happens. We came out of the unified field into this reality, and we're going back into the unified field. That's what unity is. So, in order to make change and movement now, we first need to heal. So this is an important thing. And the way I'm doing it is documented on spirittech.com. So that's probably the best way to contact me too, is through the contact page. That's the simplest thing there. That will come directly to me. And events, well, that's what I'm taking out to the world, and I'm doing not just providing product, I'm also giving classes in how to apply that product in healing modalities. So
cool. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ron. It was a super pleasure talking to you. I loved your answer, and who knows, maybe I'll bug you again in the future with a few more. You guys, we've come to the conclusion of this interview in the series on the ATIH, Drunvalo's work on the awakening the illumined heart. If you have any questions, please drop them in the section below. Here, I myself or one of the teachers will answer the question. Feel free to also get in touch with Ron. The website will be in there. And until the next interview, I'll see you soon, and take it easy. All right. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you, Gabriel.